So in astrology, the orbits of the planets are incredibly important, and they're important in terms of our individual growth. For example, Jupiter takes 12 years to go around a chart. And that's a really good little chunk of time, because we can really look at our life in 12-year cycles. You know, as we get onto Pluto, that takes over 200 years to go around a chart, we don't get to experience the cycle. But with a planet like Jupiter, we get to experience a 12-year cycle. And that means it spends 1 year in each sign of the zodiac. And so we get to grow through whatever sign Jupiter is touching for an entire year. So that's a tangible period of time where we can really grow. So for example, if you're a Capricorn and Jupiter is in the sign of Capricorn, you better believe during that 1 year, there's tremendous opportunity to outgrow an old self. There's tremendous opportunity to give more of your gift. And what's fascinating with these cycles is that, of course, every 12 years, if you're a Capricorn, let's say, it comes back to your sun. And you have an opportunity to look back, well, what was that 12-year cycle like? And what is this 12-year cycle? What is the opportunity of this 12-year cycle? So Jupiter has a 12-year cycle, and it's a powerful cycle of growth. Saturn's cycle is 28 to 30 years. And there's something called a Saturn return. It is when Saturn returns to its natal position. So what that means is that we have been tested in every area of our life at that point. And what that symbolizes is an astrological adulthood, because the first Saturn return, well, okay, now you've been tested. What does your life look like? What do you need to let go of? What do you need to step forward with? Second Saturn return occurs at 56 to 60. And it's a time when you can really step into your greatest authority and your greatest soul purpose. So we pay attention to the cycles of these planets because they afford opportunity to grow in tangible ways. Uranus has an 84-year cycle, and so it moves relatively slowly. It will only hit your sun once in a lifetime. It will only hit your ascendant once in a lifetime, but it has an opportunity all along those 84 years to hit the different points in your chart. It spends 7 to 8 years in each sign, or in each astrological house, 7 to 8 years. So you better believe that if it's working on your chart in a particular area, that area can be revolutionized, that area can be awakened, that area can be reinvented.
What I'm going to share with you now is just an understanding of the psychological archetypes or the psychological implications or symbolism behind each planet. And you got to understand that a planet is an entity too. A planet is an entity, and it's evolving, and it has a lower nature and a higher nature. And sometimes the planet's lower nature is being what is recognized, and sometimes it's its higher nature.
So just very simply put, the planets are great beings and living beings, and they are evolving as we are evolving, and they are moving through initiations of consciousness as we are moving through initiations of consciousness. And some of the planets have evolved more fully than others. And so when we speak of the sacred planets, they are those that have gone beyond certain initiations, where the non-sacred planets are still on the path of evolution, but have not reached the same level as the sacred planets. So there are certain planets, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Vulcan, Neptune, that are the sacred planets. And they have journeyed further and are fully soul-infused. So the non-sacred are Sun and the Moon, although in a different category. Mars, Earth, and Pluto are all the non-sacred planets.
I'll just go through all of the planets and give you a sense of what they represent. We use the word planet, but I'm going to include the sun and the moon in this too. So the sun is the great symbol in astrology of several things, and in a way the sun is It's the symbol of identity. It's the symbol of beingness. And that's why the sun is the absolute perfect symbol for the sense of self, because it is the symbol in the sky of the great centralizing force. The sun is also the symbol of vitality. It represents the principle of vitality. But the sun is also the symbol of the soul, too. So that's how to understand the sun. Now, in esoteric astrology, the next planet out isn't actually Mercury, it's Vulcan. Now, Vulcan is not used in traditional astrology at all. But Vulcan in esotericism is a very sacred planet, very powerful, and it's said to be within 8 degrees of the sun within the orbit of Mercury. And Vulcan is, in mythology, Vulcan was the blacksmith of the gods. And Vulcan would reshape matter, raw matter, with power and will, and shape it into something luminous and useful. And in a way, that's the role of Vulcan in the chart. It's the great forger of form in order to support that make it more useful to the soul's initiative.
It's named Vulcan for a reason. It's the blacksmith of the gods. So it sort of, it bashes the form into shape, as it were. It uses its power to ready the form for the greatest light and to ready the form for the soul. So it has tremendous intensity, tremendous power. It is the esoteric ruler of Taurus. And, Taurus itself at the highest levels has tremendous will. It's an interesting question. Why have we not discovered Vulcan? And I would suggest that we're not ready to discover Vulcan because once we discover Vulcan, it will have a certain power in the world that we need to be able to wield and work with. And the first ray is no small energy. So on one hand, we've discovered the planets along the way when we were ready to incorporate and work with them more fully. And the question is whether we're actually ready to work with the energy of will and power at this level, whether humanity is ready for it. There's also the thought that Vulcan is very close to the sun and therefore it has not been discovered yet. But perhaps at a subtler level, the time will come when we're ready.
The next planet out is Mercury. Now, Mercury on one level, Mercury in its lower nature is all about the active mind, and the busyness of the mind. When we say a person is very mercurial, we're saying they're very mental, but also mercurial can represent all over the place in thought and activity. Think about liquid mercury. It's all over the place. It's hard to get a hold of. So Mercury has been associated with mind and activity, and it's also been called in mythology the messenger of the gods.
Mercury is a beautiful ray 4 planet. It is a planet of the illumined mind. It's the bridge builder. It's the connector. It's the messenger. So in our own astrological charts, wherever Mercury shows up has a lot to do with our message, what we've been given to say, how we can build bridges in our lives, what we want to be a voice for in the world. It is quick, it is sharp, it is clever, it is the messenger.
On a lower level, it just means chitta. It means just the busy mind. On a more traditional level, it represents the principle of intelligent thought, as well as it can represent communications. On a higher level, it represents pure Buddhi monastic consciousness, pure intuitive consciousness. This is when it truly acts as the so-called messenger of the gods.
Mercury gives us a chance to give our soul gift through words, through writing, through conversation, through connection. And Mercury is very connected to building the bridge between the personality and the soul. It's very connected to the Antakarana.
The next planet out to look at is Venus. Now, Venus is a very sacred planet, and Venus is an entity that in traditional astrology it's associated with love. It's so interesting because, when a traditional astrologer looks at it and they see where Venus is, it says something about the love nature of the individual. But what's interesting about that is that that's true in terms of Venus's personality. Venus has a second ray personality, which is the ray of love. But Venus's soul nature isn't second ray, it's fifth ray, and that's the ray of pure, higher mind. And so Venus, on a higher level, has a lot to do with the mind of the soul, the mind of your higher nature. And so an esoteric astrologer will look at Venus and can interpret it in those two ways. And there's truth to both ways of looking at it, whereas traditional astrology doesn't offer that.
Venus it's a fifth ray planet. It rules the Ajna center. It is a planet of the illumined mind. It's a planet where the heart and the head meet, where it's a planet of extraordinary wisdom. Wherever it is in the chart is where we can find soul satisfaction, where, in a way, you could say, do more of this when it's in the chart, because it's a place where we can see the light. So wherever Venus is in a chart, whatever sign it's in, we can use that energy to give more light and to see the light in another. It's a planet of extraordinary light. The fifth ray is so interesting coming through Venus, right? Because the fifth ray has so much to do with light, and Venus has so much to do with light. It's a planet of value, what we value, where we put our energy, where we spend our love and time. It's a planet of beauty. It's a planet of the feminine. It is the glyph for woman. So it carries the divine feminine in each of us. If Mars is the personality, then Venus is the soul within the chart. And we want to do more of Venus. Venus can uplift the Mars in our chart.
The Earth is interestingly also used in this philosophy in astrology. It's so interesting. Traditional astrology doesn't have the Earth as a ruler of any sign. And I always think, that's the most incredible oversight I've ever heard of, But the Earth is an entity, and the Earth is part of the zodiac, and the Earth is part of the solar system. And it's said to be the spiritual ruler of the sign of Sagittarius. And it's said to be the hierarchical ruler of the sign of Gemini. And the Earth, in a more practical way, the Earth's position always represents where to ground your truth. So always think of the Earth as the symbol for grounded application.
So Earth is a non-sacred planet. It's a third-ray planet. We're in the process of the sacredization of the Earth, and humanity is a huge part of that. The Earth in the chart is opposite the Sun, of course, and in esoteric astrology, it's often the place where the work is done. You can look at the sun's position, you can look at the rising position, but where the Earth is a very practical position for where you can solidly give your gift, where you can manifest your gift, whatever sign it's in. There's a tangibility to it. There's a tangibility to the Earth. The Earth is one of the younger planets. It's on its way to higher initiations, but for the time being, it's still a non-sacred planet, and we are all part of bringing more light to this Earth.
The next planet out would be Mars. Now, on a traditional level, Mars is viewed as the warrior. Mars is viewed as passion. Mars is viewed as intensity. Mars sometimes gets a bad rap because it has to do with irritation, inflammation. These are words that are often key words for understanding Mars. And there's truth to all of it. But Mars is also a planet that represents unbending spiritual commitment. And so when Mars, on a higher level, when Mars is integrating into the life, and it's saying something about where to apply your focused emotional conviction.
Mars is the warrior. It's a sixth ray planet. It rules the integrated personality. It's connected to the solar plexus as well in the body. It has tremendous drive and desire, and at a certain level, until we're more soul infused, it can be where the fight is in the chart. It can be where things are stirred up. It can be where we go after something with an emotional intensity. As we progress, Mars becomes more and more of I would say in a way, the illumined warrior, the one that fights for the good, that one that fights for the light, that one that fights for the cause. So it's just a matter of like how evolved the Mars in you is, right? What is the warrior fighting for? And as the personality is more and more integrated, it becomes a vehicle through which you can give your gift. So Mars ruling the integrated personality, of course, then, as we progress, becomes more and more of a servant to the soul. So, Mars is a sixth ray planet. For the most part on Earth, we've had a lot of Mars, right? We've had wars and wars and wars, and a lot of conflict, and we have our own inner Mars wrestlings. Perhaps one of the most important things that has to happen for humanity is that we do have to integrate our personality, so that, in fact, there's a conversation that can occur with Venus, There's a conversation that can occur to fight the good fight, to fight the right fight, to use these energies, not clashing, not for what we want. Mars at a lower level wants a lot, But hopefully as we evolve, what we want refines, and what we want is for the good of all.
The next planet out would be Jupiter. And Jupiter is a very sacred planet, second-ray planet, and it is a planet that is, some key words to help us understand Jupiter would be things like fulfillment, goals, dreams, aspirations, yearnings, wisdom, expansion, wholeness, vision. All of those are Jupiterian terms. So wherever Jupiter is found in a disciple's life, it says something about the placement or the expression of their wisdom. It says something about the nature of how life can move towards spiritual fulfillment, and in many ways it can define right direction.
Jupiter is, of course, this tremendous, generous, large planet. Its energy is that big. It's a second-ray planet. It's the energy of love and wisdom. It's an energy of the growth of consciousness in our chart. Wherever it is, there is a blessing. Wherever Jupiter is in our chart, we're being held. There's unsought opportunity that presents itself. It is the planet that truly helps us grow through nourishment and through generosity and illumination. It's the teaching planet, it is the great teacher. You could say that Jupiter represents all the great teachers through time, because it is the energy that uplifts others and helps others grow through its touch. And it also, on a certain level, Jupiter, it rules death, because in order to grow into the next cycle of our lives, we have to die to something in ourselves. And so I suppose at every great transition, Jupiter is present, because it is asking us to call in more and more light, and allowing us to leave behind something that no longer truly reflects who we are.
The next planet out is Saturn. And Saturn is one of the most powerful planets out there. In traditional astrology, it tends to get a bad rap. Saturn is used in traditional astrology to represent things like hardship, challenge, lessons to be learned, karma. All of that's true, by the way. If you want to know where karma is playing out in a person's chart, look to Saturn. It's said to be the lord of karma. But Saturn is also the planet that is, in a way, it is said that Saturn escorts you to the gate of initiation. Because Saturn is the planet that makes evolution possible in a certain sense. It ensures that we go through the right lessons in order to find that place of full enlightenment. Saturn is the planet that is most distant from the sun that you can see with the naked eye. Everything beyond Saturn, you have to have a telescope to see it. So symbolically, Saturn rules the frontier between the seen worlds and the unseen worlds. So what's the seen worlds mean? Well, the seen worlds represents my personality consciousness, my day-to-day consciousness. And what does the unseen world symbolize? The soul and the spirit beyond. And Saturn sits at the gate. And Saturn says, you really want to live in the unseen world rather than just getting a glimpse now and then? Saturn says, no problem. I can make that happen. But here's what you got to do first. So Saturn forces you to earn your way to enlightenment. It's so interesting. It's connected, as I said, to the law of karma. It's the law of karma. But it's so interesting because the law of karma has another name. Another name for the law of karma is the law of opportunity. The law of opportunity. Saturn is both a bestower of karma and a conveyor of earned opportunity. It's a fantastic planet when you really rise to its occasion.
So Saturn is a third-ray planet. It is the planet of one's inner authority. At a certain level, it is the planet that we all must reckon with. You know, at a certain time, we outgrow our parents and the soul becomes the parent. You know, Saturn is the father energy. So oftentimes in a chart, it represents the energy of the father. But we become our own fathers, we become our own parents, and we become the authors of our lives. And wherever Saturn is in a chart is the place where we get to pay attention, grow up, mature, stand up straight, commit. It is the planet where we are tested. It's a planet of great, great testing, and where we have to overcome these tests to stand at the top of the mountain. It's the planet that rules initiation, right? So at every level of initiation of consciousness, Saturn is present. You know, Saturn rules Capricorn, which is about climbing the mountaintop of initiation. And at every level, you have to be ready. You have to be fit in order to open yourself to the greater energies that want to pour through those transpersonal energies, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So Saturn gets us fit. Saturn tests us. Saturn provides the opportunity for us to be ready. It's the planet that rules time. And so with Saturn, the time is now. The time is now to grow. The time is now to prepare yourself, prepare all of us for the age of Aquarius, really. So Saturn gives the cool, clear light to any situation, to any relationship. It brings in a level of maturity and authority and discipline that is needed for us to grow. Whereas Jupiter might say, yes, grow. Saturn says, grow, and I will be here to help you as you face these tests.
The next planet out, that's the planet Uranus. And Uranus is one of the most powerful planets in the chart. And it is said in traditional astrology, and I tend to agree with this, is that until a person is on the path, Uranus is going to have an effect that is more related to the mass consciousness of humanity, the collective consciousness, and less toward the individual. But once you're on the path, Uranus starts to have a much more individualized effect in the life. Key words for Uranus, words like change, freedom, reorientation, eccentricities, authenticity, revolution, doing it a new way, and the unexpected. Those are all Uranian terms. And Uranus is, in the larger sense, it's one of the most advanced of the planets, and it's said to be the great initiator. In other words, it's the Hierophant. If a person is going to take a particular initiation, you can bet that Uranus is going to be strongly placed in a very important position, because it is said to be the wielder of electric fire, and it's connected to what is called metaphorically the rod of initiation. It applies the fire. It's a very, very powerful planet. It's also called the planet of occultism.
Uranus is a seventh ray planet. It's a very important planet at this time because the seventh ray is coming into manifestation, and Uranus is profoundly connected to the seventh ray. It is also connected to Aquarius, which is the age of Aquarius is what is dawning now. So Uranus is a revolutionary planet. It's a planet of great authenticity. It's a planet of great freedom. It's a planet of reinvention. If Saturn follows the rules, then Uranus wants to break them, wants to shatter them, wants to create freedom within form so that life can pour through. It's the god of electricity. It's the god of lightning. It strikes suddenly and unexpectedly. It's the great awakener. It's the place where we can wake others up, or we can wake up ourselves. In a way, wherever it's in the chart, we're being asked to wake up there. We're being asked to change there. Wherever Saturn is, we're being asked to pay attention and be disciplined and follow the rules. Wherever Uranus is, we're being asked to break some of the rules and to enliven and wake up that area of our being.
The next planet out is Neptune. Neptune is a planet that is very love-based. Neptune is a marvelous planet, although traditional astrology tends to see only its negative and emphasize its negative more than anything. So when you talk to a traditional astrologer, they'll always talk about Neptune, well, not always, but frequently. They'll talk about Neptune as being the planet that creates elusive thinking. It can lead to a kind of fuzzy perception. It can lead to disillusionment, disappointment, confusion. Those are words that are often kind of tagged with this planet. And there's truth to it. But Neptune is, on a higher level, is the symbol of compassion. Neptune is very much connected to intuition and the imaginative faculty and mystical yearning. And in truth, Neptune is the planet most associated with the Christ principle. If you want to find the Christ in your chart, you look to Neptune. So I guess what I'm saying is that Neptune has a much, much higher understanding of its application in our lives when we see it from an esoteric point of view.
Neptune is a sixth ray planet, and it is a planet of incredible devotion and idealism. And it is the energy of it carries the energy of the Christ. It carries the energy of unconditional love. It is called the god of the waters. And so, Neptune, as with all the planets, there's a great journey about how they are experienced. And at one level, Neptune in a chart can be experienced as disillusion and confusion and, the emotional plane run amok. But at the highest levels, Neptune refines the emotional life, and it is a planet of extraordinary sensitivity and extraordinary availability and compassion. I mean, it truly is the planet of boundless compassion. It rules the imagination, it rules the downflow of inspiration. It's the planet that rules poetry, it rules music, it rules these arts that, in a way, there's something ephemeral, there's something hidden underneath. It's Neptune is always a little bit elusive. I always find as an astrologer that I talk about it, sometimes last, because where has it gone? It's got a kind of invisibility about it. But it's a felt planet. But primarily it's a planet of devotion and love.
Pluto is a kind of a two-edged sword planet. Pluto, in one sense, is a great transformer, but it's also a great rebel. Wherever Pluto's in your chart, it can say something about the opportunity to deeply transform yourself, but Pluto is also the planet that can shake things up. It's been called the dredger. Pluto, it happens to rule Scorpio, and Scorpio is the sign that's all about looking for the shadow deep inside, looking for those aspects of consciousness that defeat us from being who we truly could be. And Pluto brings it up to the surface and says, you might want to take a look at this, says Pluto. So Pluto reveals the shadow aspects of consciousness that must be transformed. I'm using shadow in the Jungian sense, to shadow in that sense. I mean, for the Christian, it might be called the devil within that's exposed. In esotericism, it's called the dweller on the threshold. But the point is that all those aspects of consciousness that are hidden and dissonant are exposed through the power of Pluto.
Pluto, which of course astrologers still consider a planet, is a first-ray planet, and it is ultimately the great healer. But first, it requires a lot of cleaning out. It requires lifting what is toxic or lifting what is dark into the light, where it can be seen or transformed into love. So it is a planet of great will and power and intensity. It dives deep. Anybody who has strong Pluto in their chart, there's a certain intensity, there's a certain desire to penetrate, there's a certain desire to get to the core of the matter, the heart of the matter. It is a planet of great transformation, and it is a planet of great death and rebirth. I mean, it is a non-sacred planet, so it is on its own journey of sacredization, but it is ultimately the healer, because we have to address the endarkened parts of ourselves in order to live more fully aligned with the soul.
So that's a broad overview of what the planets are. And I also mentioned that the moon is a factor that represents the instinctual past that needs to be transformed.
So imagine that, in fact, what we are all coming to terms with in the solar system, which seems so vast, and we have more and more beautiful pictures of it every day, and we think of this magnificent solar system as unfathomable. And our Earth is a speck in the solar system, which is a speck, and on and on and on. So we are just one tiny piece of such a vaster system that we are only beginning to understand.